Hello and welcome to episode 2 of Brad Ventures with the Psych, the place to discuss all things the mind and consciousness and psychedelics. Today, we're going to be speaking to Tanner. Tanner is a US military veteran who served with the 25th Infantry. Tanner has since been suffering with PTSD and has finally discovered the therapeutic benefits of MDMA and psilocybin mushrooms, and he's kindly agreed to share his journey with us. Give me a like and subscribe, and I hope you enjoyed the video. Hello, sir. How's it going?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm very well. I'm super appreciative of you coming on, man. It's great to speak to you, so thanks for donating some time.
Thank you for having me, man.
Oh, it's awesome. Maybe we could start with you kind of introducing yourself, tell us your name, where you're from, tell us a bit about your military career and maybe about your psychedelic use, and then we could break it down and explore it in more detail. How does that sound?
Sure. My name is Tanner Fisher. I spent just 4 years in the Army, infantry. I served with the 25th Infantry. Um, just one contract. I would say I joined for, at the time, I think I wanted to maybe just get free college or
Mm,
just redirect my life. But I think overall, I took something back from it, and the psychedelics definitely helped me uh redirect where I was going after my service
hmm.
and kind of just find more depth in just in life in general.
Brilliant. So going right back to the start, what was childhood like for you? Did you have a good upbringing?
I did. I grew up in very rural outdoors. I actually grew up in a very old-fashioned Christian home, and
Hmm.
some of that is some that I've had to come more to peace with too as I get older. But I'm sure we'll unravel that with the psychedelics.
Of course.
I grew up in rural New Mexico, a small town called Silver City.
Awesome. And am I right in saying you're not there now, right? You've moved to Arizona, is that true?
Yes, I live in Arizona for work.
So I'm not very good at my US geography. Is that close to New Mexico
Yes,
as far
they're
as
side by
mileage goes?
side. It's one of the large states in the Southwest, so they're side by side.
Cool. So did you have any family members that served in the military that served as like an inspiration to you, that served, or a role
I
model
did,
that?
I did. I was raised by my grandparents a lot growing up, and my grandpa had a brief military service as well. But my grandmother's brothers, my great uncles, were both Vietnam veterans
Oh,
and both
wow.
Army and both infantry, and that's kind of where my kind of growing up, I wanted to be like them a little bit,
Of
you know,
course.
and I looked at a lot of their pictures, and just in hindsight, you're a small child, you don't understand what war is or
Mm.
what this is, but it's you see their old pictures and these uncles that are old, and you see them young and vibrant and fit and traveling the world, and it kind of sells it for you as a young child.
Mm. It's crazy, isn't it? Seeing photos of your older relatives, you can really imagine what they were like when they were younger. It's kind of surreal. I had an uncle that served in the military. I don't know if I told you I served with the parachute regiment for 6 years. Did I tell you that when we spoke?
Yes, you did.
Yeah, yeah. So I really enjoyed that. But yeah, I had an uncle who was in the paras that kind of um, he was a real inspiration to me. I mean, do you feel like this was your calling? Did you want to join the army from being really young, or was it like a last minute decision?
So I did. And then I think we all go through like a teen angst, um, you know, lapse in time where I just wasn't interested in it. And then I think I actually joined a little bit later. Was 22, 23.
Hmm.
And at the time, I think I just needed redirection. I was kind of petering out with college and doing okay, but just not interested in anything. And, just trying to figure out where to be.
Hmm.
And I think that, yeah, I don't know that it was a calling, but when the time came, it seemed that way. like, man, this is a good opportunity for me.
So what did you say you were at college before? Like what were you doing before you went into the
I
military?
did some like early medical stuff, and then
Oh,
I
okay.
moved around. And I was 18, 19, just partying, really. And
Mm,
I was doing okay in school. I just didn't have direction on what I really wanted. You know what I mean? Nothing felt meaningful yet.
I hear you. So what made you join? Just tell me again. Sorry, I didn't catch it. The regiment that you belong to.
I was with 25th Infantry.
Okay.
There's two locations for that unit. They're in Alaska and in Hawaii. And I was
Wow.
assigned to Hawaii.
Wow.
So that was
What's it?
not a bad gig.
Did you get, when I think of Hawaii, the first thing that comes to my mind is like big waves for surfing. Did you have any time to enjoy that side of it? Or were you too busy
I was terrible at
working?
surfing. You have to be fit in a different way that most people wouldn't understand. But yeah, it's surfing and water. Yeah, it was really cool.
Hmm.
If you're into that like
Do you know
type of
what?
water stuff.
I don't know what your knowledge is like of the UK. I've just moved up to the northeast in a place called Newcastle, and it's
Okay.
very different to what I was right down the other side on the south before. So I'm looking out on the east at the North Sea, and the waves here are just ridiculous. And there's people surfing all the time, but I mean, it's like I don't know what it's like where you are. It's like 2 degrees here at the moment in the day, so it's not like I'd be jumping in
It's
there anytime soon.
uh it's still Arizona. We are in the high desert, so it gets cold. We had snow a couple of days ago, but it's also 70 degrees today.
Wow,
So
wow, it's crazy, it's crazy. So, um, like, what age did you say you joined the military again?
I want to say I was 22. So a little
Hmm.
bit later than most.
And did you
Um
enjoy? Sorry, go on.
yeah, I was, you know, I'm sure you experience this too with 18, 19-year-old kids, just
Hmm.
brand new.
And did you like overall? Did you enjoy your experience in the army? I know that we're going to talk about the mental health issues that you've been dealing with, but
Sure.
you had a good time.
Um, when I think that the perspective changes with time. I think now I see that it was an opportunity for me and just a stepping stone. Um, I don't know that it was quite a calling, like you had said, as much as it was just an opportunity and a way to change my pace and maybe redirect when I was in,
Mm,
lost youth. But I
mm.
think there's good and bad that comes with everything, and I think that overall it was good for me.
So if you had to pick one, because I'm sure you've got many, have you got like a favorite memory that you'd like to speak about or anything like that at all? Can you think of?
Well, I try to think constructively about all of that time, but I think that one thing you can take that I've been able to utilize in so many different avenues since then is that when you figure out that quitting isn't an option, you open a lot of opportunity to just think outside of the box. You
I
know what I
hear
mean?
you. Hmm.
And I'm sure,
Totally.
I'm sure you can speak on that from your time as well. When just during training, like once you figure out, okay, quitting's not an option. So what do I do next? What now? And
Mm,
I think that's probably one of the best memories and things I take from that is like I learned that small phrase that has helped me for a long time. Like, what now? Okay, here I
mm.
am. This is bad. This is bad. But what now? There's still, I'm not quitting. It's not an option.
That's brilliant. I can totally um, relate to what you're talking about. I think it's that kind of mindset is brilliant for it
It's
helps you
magic, man.
realize, yeah, it helps you realize your full potential, right? Because just saying
Right.
no it's just not there. So it's like,
So there's
what
alchemy
other
in,
direction are
in
we going in?
there's alchemy in shutting that window and in the way that it opens so many opportunities to be okay. Here's where I am, but what's next? Where am I going next?
Hmm.
You can redirect that energy instead of just letting it pull you down. You can redirect like, where am I going? You can grasp at straws at least.
Hmm. There's some things like that in life that you just learn from experience. It's not something you could be just told and taught, you know? It's something that you have to learn from doing something like joining the military or having a really crazy thing happen to you at some point in life. So um, the next thing I wanted to speak to you about was kind of what we were just conversing about with young lads joining the military. So I joined when I was 16.
16.
And I was 16 and
So how does that work over there?
so yeah, it'd be interesting to hear how it works in the US. So when you're 16 years old, you go to a place called Harrogate, which is like a training facility for you're called a junior soldier. And
Okay.
essentially junior soldier is a title, but I mean, we didn't get treated any differently to what how I was treated when I was in was I when I was a fully qualified soldier, you know, and you're kind of it's over here. I don't know what it's like with you guys. When you leave school at 16, you have to continue education somehow. So you can either go off and do your A levels, which is what you do just before going to university. You can do an apprenticeship, like become a mechanic or something, or you can join the army, and they do various you've got like a mix of practical military elements and also doing what were called functional skills, which is just like an educational program, if you like. Um, so yeah, I joined there, and you're there for how long are you there for? You're there for a year, and then you join the military, the adult
Okay.
military, if you like. So yeah, but the military like to make out that they employ young lads because they're fit and healthy and they don't have, you know, a bad back and sore joints like I definitely have now getting into my late 20s. And I think
Yeah.
that's absolutely true. That's the reason. Um, but it's difficult to ignore that there's a certain aspect involving the fact that they're young, impressionable, immature, and maybe unable to make an informed decision. And I feel
I
like
think
that
that I think that you're onto that. I think it's just malleability in general
mm,
with, physically, mentally, even somewhat emotionally, unfortunately.
mm. I remember watching videos of the parachute regiment as a child. You know, I just left school, literally just left secondary school, and the idea that I could be jumping out of planes and um,
Oh,
earning
it's
a
an action movie,
salary.
man.
You know, I wasn't thinking about the government's intentions.
Right, right.
Where were you at in your mind when you joined? Were you a mature young 20-year-old in your early 20s? Like how where were
Um,
you at?
Somewhat. I definitely had a different impression in my mind. I have, over here, it's not, especially in the Southwest and the states I grew up in, it's not uncommon to be growing up around firearms.
Oh,
That's
really?
very, very common. Like Arizona actually has the most relaxed gun laws in the whole United States, with the exception of Texas, maybe.
Yeah, that's quite alien for us. Like,
It is, yeah. So for me, I kind of had some of the understanding of like, man, these are firearms. Like this can cause damage. So, at the time when you're that age, you think and
mm,
you're like, oh, well, but it's not the same. It's never what you expect. It's not the action movie that is portrayed on the commercials. It's not.
mm. Do you think you were I was going to say acclimatized, that's not the right word, like kind of normalized to the idea that there were weapons everywhere? Is that just like, is that not a big deal for you? Was that not a big deal for you when you were a kid? And did you go
No,
hunting
it
with your
wasn't. It
dad or anything
wasn't,
like that?
especially growing up rural. Even now, it's just it's around. It's not something that I focus on or obsess over, like
Mm,
maybe during my time in the military or directly after, but it's still just not uncommon here.
mm. The next thing I wanted to speak to you about was military recruitment advertisements or commercials for you guys.
Okay.
So I don't know what it's like in the US, but the British recruitment ads are more like what I would describe as propaganda. They show like the fun side of the military, you know, the laughing, the camaraderie, the machine guns, the walking around the jungle in your freshly ironed combats and your freshly applied
Right. All the
camper
medals and
boots.
the prestige.
It's just it's not realistic. And
Right.
whilst I understand it's supposed to be an advertisement and the whole purpose of that is to persuade, I think they need to show a bit of authenticity, like the other side of the coin. Just as cigarette packets have pictures of
Right.
dying smokers with black lungs and breathing apparatus, like maybe military commercials should have videos of war. I mean, what do you think about that?
Um, I think that that sounds great. I just don't think that that would ever
Mm,
play out. And I think that it's just marketing is what it is, unfortunately.
hmm
And I don't think that I fell prey to like the marketing. I think that was just like a choice that I made. But there are absolutely, I think, you know, here you have to be 18 to join. You can do future soldier programs like you were kind of explaining. There's similar things. They have ROTC, I guess they have for high school students, which is like junior officer training and stuff like that.
mm.
But yeah, I think it's definitely it's marketed. They make it look like a fun action film.
It's a business, I guess, just like every other business. So how long did you serve and how long have you been out now?
So I served just one contract, 4 years. I've been out for about nine.
hmm Oh, you've quite recently come out. I didn't realize it was so recent.
It's not,
I
yeah, it
won't.
was, I'm 36. So yeah, it's been nine, almost 10 years now.
Oh, years. Sorry, I thought you meant months. I was like, oh,
No, no,
you
no,
just
no. I'm
left.
sorry.
No,
No, no,
that's not recent. I
no.
actually left about 10 years ago. I think I left in. No, I didn't. That was a lie. I left in 2019, so I guess six
Okay.
years ago. So yeah. So you've
Mine
told
was like the
me.
end of 15.
Oh, okay. So you told me that you've been suffering with some quite severe PTSD and other mental health issues. Would you feel
I
comfortable speaking about that?
Sure.
Just tell us tell us
Not,
about
this,
yeah.
none of this is real recent. In fact, that's kind of, you know, why it's been cool to talk to you and the things you're working on. And
Mm,
um, I think just post military coming out and even just adapting to not being in the military anymore, thinking, okay, now what? Also, now again, what direction do I go? And I think that part of your service is that, you're so in it and you're so present, not in a good way, that you're so drawn in and present into that time that you're not, at least for me, I wasn't really consciously thinking like, what do I do after this? It's kind of
mm,
like hell on wheels, like I may not make it back, so let's do it now type thing.
hmm
And I think that kind of added to that. But just in general, readapting, I think, is what surfaces, I think, PTSD, because I think while you're in it and you're around people maybe that are also suffering from some of that, it doesn't seem as apparent.
I hear you. I hear you. Um, so just for people watching that might not be informed, could you just tell us exactly what PTSD is? And I mean, are there different forms? What do you experience?
I think that one of the, and I've heard other people speak on this as well. I think one of the problems with PTSD is that we are grouping the effects of trauma way too widely as like, yeah, you have PTSD. It doesn't mean a lot now to say that.
Hmm.
To say, oh yeah, you have, so this trauma, it's specific. And I think that I don't want to jump ahead too much, but I think that one of the reasons maybe psychedelics are hitting home for a lot of people is that the one thing psychedelics are specific, and so is your trauma. So, there's a thousand different types of trauma that people are calling PTSD. And it's maybe it is, but it's, I think they're more nuance and more context to, exactly what that means to each person too.
hmm So, like, at what point in your life did you realize that there was something wrong? And what I mean by that is, I don't know, I imagine your kind of cognition is all over the place. And maybe you don't draw a line between your military service and what you're experiencing. Maybe you just thought you were suffering with whatever it is that you were suffering with. When did you go, oh right,
Um,
something's not right here?
well, um, I would say I started to see a shift in the way that people I loved and cared about were treating me. And then kind of redirecting and realizing like that's stemming from the way I'm acting and the way that I am depressed or angry or treating these people and they don't know how to act because maybe I don't know. So to kind of go back to your previous question, I feel like for me what made me sink into like, oh, I think I have this is like feeling like you've lost yourself. Like
Mm.
now you're back in the real world and but you're not yourself anymore. Like I can't be me because it's just something's changed. I've seen these things, I've done these things, I've so I think that when I realized that something like that was affecting me was when I started to kind of redirect and be like, oh, wait a minute, like I'm the common denominator here. Like these people aren't treating me weird. They don't know how to be because I don't either.
Mm. I hear you. So like in terms of actual like symptoms, I mean, are we talking like depression, anxiety, emotional disconnection? What are
Depression,
we talking?
anxiety, just short tempered, very short tempered
Mm.
sometimes. And just overall negative outlook. Some days, and I'm sure we'll get into that as well. But part of that was, I don't know if you were medicated at all for during your service time or after your service time.
I wasn't
Um,
actually. I kept away. Yeah, but go on. Sorry.
okay, okay. Part of, and I don't have a lot to speak on like the SSRIs or like I was on those briefly for a little while after like a deployment and stuff, but for me, they had issued a lot of people in our unit benzodiazepines, benzos.
Wow.
And if you know infantry soldiers, well, we drink a lot and
Uh-huh.
you know, we live like it's our last day a lot of the times because it's been close to that a few. So I think a lot of people were mixing those with alcohol. And at the time, I was drinking recreationally, but also just taking these benzos to feel calm, to not feel on edge, to not feel really is what it comes down to. And I think that that may be an issue with just meds in general with soldiers. And I was prescribed these meds during my service time and much after, and it was just making me completely numb and like a zombie.
So, are there any particular triggers that would make it worse? Like you were saying, alcohol. Is that a problem in terms
Uh,
of?
yeah, I think that just substance abuse in general is not, you know, I've seen it with friends, soldier friends, other people that, may have soldiers in their family and are just coming to realize it. But yeah, definitely substance abuse, even prescribed things from the military doctors that, you're allowed to have, but maybe isn't great for you to have.
I the reason
Um,
I are sorry, go on.
as far as like alcohol being trigger, I think that it's a depressant. So I think that um and definitely myself and others, just you reach the point where if you're already having issues with mental health and stuff like that, it's definitely not going to change anything for the better to add a depressant, alcohol.
I The reason I asked about the alcohol was there were a lot of guys who I was serving with who were wonderful people when they were sober. And I'm not going to give too much any information about them personally, but they would snap. Um, on alcohol, and there's this one guy that sticks in my mind, and he was a really sound dude, and he had served in the early Afghan tours, like Herrick 8, the really brutal
Okay.
tours, and he was. I didn't actually see this myself, but I would hear lots of stories from my friends where the guys would be drinking in the block, as they always would be every weekend, and he would have, five, six, seven beers, and he'd get pretty drunk, and all of a sudden he would just lash out unexpectedly, provoked or unexpectedly. And the reason he remains in my mind is because he ended up actually bottling one of our new guys that had just joined, and there was a whole thing there, and he was made out to be a bad person. I mean, he got. What happened? He got punished in some way. And it just made me think. I wondered if, I bet there's many people serving across all militaries who are in dire need of some kind of mental health support. And not only are they not getting it, but they don't even realize they need it. Going back to what you were saying earlier, I guess they're institutionalized, like they're still playing soldier and they don't realize what's going on because they're around everybody else who's in the same boat, you
Right.
know?
It is. It's very much a pack mentality. The way like you say that, that's the first thing that came to my mind is it really is a like a pack mentality of like you don't want to seem like weak, and then you live in that character for so long that you're you're afraid to fall at the back of the pack,
Mm,
and then
absolutely.
I think that some of the burying and stuff like that is definitely where maybe some of these people would not be as bad off with their mental health if they had, like you were saying, like some sort of intervention early on.
Mm. So, how has this affected your life, Tanner? I mean, I imagine it's going to have serious consequences for your relationships, social skills, career. I mean, how has it actually
um
affected
as
you?
far as the I spent time with some family and stuff when I came back, and they noticed, and I think that like my mom and my sister had kind of walked on eggshells to express to me a little bit like, hey, something's different, you're very angry, or you know what I mean. And I think that even some of the embarrassment that came with that was like the some of the moments where I'm like, man, I have to do something. Like I don't want to hurt these people that I love. Um, yeah, I think that it definitely affects you, but I think that also there's a way to that's the alchemy, man, that we were talking about earlier. Is like the now
Hmm.
what. So if you can take the responsibility and just understand that you're at a low and say now what, I think that it can be an okay thing to have a low spot and come back. And I think that that's a lot of people just need to hear that sometimes.
Absolutely. Like it's about mindfulness, and it's almost like there's no such thing as rock bottom because there's always a way to get back up. So
Right.
yeah,
Or
good
just
bit of
like I
advice
said,
right
like
there.
the now what turns rock bottom into infinite possibility. So
Mm. So, I mean, did you just try to ignore it initially? I mean, what actually um, made you?
okay, absolutely. Because I think that first of all, some like I know, and I know obviously for like you said, like people from the early Afghan, and I know people from the Iraq surge and stuff like that that I felt had a lot more good reason to have PTSD or some of that stuff. And then I did a little bit try to just I'm fine, I'm good. This is
Crack on with it,
again the
military
pack mentality.
mentality.
You're right. Again, the what you were talking about. We're still playing soldier a little bit in our minds, so that when we let that down, a lot of you know vulnerability can surface.
Hmm. And did you have, or do you have many friends that you could have reached out to that you had served with and maybe were dealing with a similar
I
thing?
I did have a couple, and I see and I still have a couple that I I speak to on occasion, just throughout the year, and we check in with each other. Yeah, I had a few. I just it depends on the person too. I'm not very I wouldn't want other people to get involved in that because again, and that's part of what you were talking about as well. Like I wouldn't want to be a weak link and pull somebody down. So when I was realizing this and going through all of this, it was kind of like a just an internal thing.
Not wanting to
It
like
felt
burden
like
someone else.
right, and it also feels like just even if you did, it's your own battle. So there's not much they can do.
Hmm. So, what's the post-service support like for US veterans in terms of mental health? I mean, today, is there any? Or do they just say, see ya?
Uh no, there is. You get, therapy and obviously tons of meds. I think that's not the military as much as it's just our maybe even medical culture for mental health is like, well, try this and then try this and then try this. And I think that's a little bit of a dangerous game to play with just chemicals and people that are just going through things like that.
Hmm.
Um,
I know,
you know,
sorry.
no, go ahead, man.
I was going to say, I know the health system is different over there to how it is in the UK, but do veterans, I'm not really clued up on it myself. Like, you guys pay for every doctor's appointment you have, you're paying for it, right? It's not like here at the
So
NHS, we just book an
I
appointment,
can get insurance through my work and stuff like that, but I do have basic medical care through the military, as part of my like disability through the military.
Okay, and what does that mean? Does that mean that you just get to see a GP without paying, or?
Right. So, a, back in like 2016 and 17, you had to go to a big VA hospital, and they were like renowned for long waits and maybe not even getting to see your visit. But
Hmm.
a few years back, they changed things to a system where you can take your VA coverage to you go to the VA and you get triaged to basically regular medical providers, and it's covered through the VA.
Hmm. So you said that you tried SRIs very briefly, and you just didn't work with you. You didn't get on with it. Is that right?
Yeah, and I think that you know I like to take full accountability for all the things I've been through, and I like to be just raw with people because I know some of these vets are probably like going through the same things. Maybe SSRIs could have worked for me, maybe benzos could have worked for me, but maybe not mixed with ridiculous amounts of alcohol and the things that these military young kids are doing every weekend.
Mm.
It's like the treatment's more like a check-in, like you're okay, right? Okay, take this, don't hurt anybody.
The thing that annoys me about SSRIs is, yes, they take away the edge, and I guess for many people, that's probably really significant if it's life or death. But it also diminishes the positive aspects of life as well. And they're notorious for making you feel emotionally numb. Like, that's not a solution. And unprocessed emotions contribute to trauma. And it's not like they go anywhere. Like if you don't process them
Right.
now, they'll catch up with you eventually, you know?
They do. Uh, and I think that I'm glad you brought that up because one of when I read the questions that you had sent me
Hmm.
and what is PTSD? When I thought like what was it that clicked for me that's like, is that PTSD? And I didn't care what it was, but to me it was losing myself. And I felt like the benzos and the SSRIs definitely contributed to that. And obviously alcohol and being just overall depressed and dealing with trauma. I When you come back to your what you think is a normal world setting and you realize like, oh, that's not me anymore. I don't know who me is now. And I
Hmm.
think that that's a dangerous game with the SSRIs and stuff like that too. Just yeah, you're like you said, you're probably just delaying a realization of these things are going to come up. So are they going to come up now or are they going to come up so much later, years after you've been numb. And I
Mm.
don't like to speak against SSRIs and stuff like that. I think they work great for some people and maybe not for some, but I just think that it's some of that being medicated and self-medicating, and some of that just contributed to feeling like that PTSD point, which was feeling like I lost myself.
Mm. It's interesting that you mentioned the benzos as well. Are you familiar with a clinical psychologist called Jordan Peterson? He's quite famous at the
I
moment.
am, of course.
Are you familiar with his experience with benzos? That's the first time that I heard about how bad they are in terms
I
of.
have heard about it maybe briefly. Kind of,
Yeah,
if I remember correctly, kind of the same thing, just not having a lot of feelings or emotions at all.
he was really ill, and he ended up going to different countries to try and I don't know what he was doing, trying to find different solutions, but he ended up being in a coma. And I imagine there probably is a way to come off of benzos gradually that wouldn't result in that kind of outcome. I don't know anything about it, but just hearing his story and how ill he was, it's quite an eye opener, actually. You know,
Right.
I the thing I really want to speak to you about is your psychedelic recovery. So tell us what happened, basically.
Sure. Well, I'll just go back and, confess a little bit. Growing up in high school, I smoked a little bit of pot.
Hmm.
Um, when I was about 19, I tried a small amount of mushrooms, maybe. Um, Nothing, significant. And then, briefly after coming back, I was in Arizona. My mom, my sister lived here, and I had just gotten my own place again and just still kind of on benzos and just feeling like directionless, I would say, still again. And just kind of in a hole, feeling like almost mourning the fact like, man, I've lost myself, like all that cool stuff that I was into, like music, and I just don't feel any of that anymore. You know what I mean?
Mm, mm.
And I had just happened to come across like a friend that lived in my apartment complex, and we, got talking a little bit, and we had smoked a joint together and just kind of had a conversation. And he gave me this um basically MDMA pill. And I was like, oh, that's not for me, man. Like, whatever. Held on to it for a while. Um, just at some point, I don't remember exactly the point. I thought, like, what's the worst that could happen? You know what I mean? I'm not doing much now anyway, directionless. And I took the MDMA pill, and I don't know if you've done any sort of Molly MDMA that they,
I
like they
have.
talk about. Okay, well then it's not exactly psychedelic in the same way that other things are, as much as it's emotionally and sensory. Well, to cut to the chase, I take this pill and I'm like, oh, this is you know feeling good, and then things set into where I'm just sitting in my apartment alone, crying, just crying, and it's perpetuated by the fact that I realized I haven't cried since I was 16. I was raised very old fashioned, very stern, very much to be a man's man. Went through the military, and then I'm sitting there just melting, crying like, man, I haven't let all of this go since I was 16.
Mm,
And it wasn't just like, oh, that's good, you're crying for the. It was one of those things where like I had this realization that if that's where, if I'm realizing this now, like something's broke. And I'm, just kind of reflecting on maybe how I've treated people recently, how I've acted recently, and the way that psychedelics do, they bring that just surreal accountability to frame with you, where you start thinking like, oh man, like I'm not doing this right, whatever this is, well, the life thing, I'm not doing it right.
Mm,
And that was just it was a breakthrough for me. And I had gotten a couple more of the MDMA pills and done that and just kind of emotionally just let it out.
mm.
If I'm being completely honest.
That's amazing. I'm so happy for you that you discovered that. It's kind of interesting that you kind of weren't doing it with intent initially either. It just kind of like
No, not
um
at all, man.
the it's interesting you mentioned about MDMA not being like a typical psychedelic because yeah, I've always considered a psychedelic to be like a mushroom or DMT and have this profound visual
Right.
experience. And since I've been doing my studying, I started doing a degree. I've been looking into like actually what a psychedelic is, and it actually the visual experience is only one element of the whole package,
Correct.
right? So, um, it's just all it's about every sensory part of you. You know, it could be your thoughts and your visions, your hearing, everything. You know, do you know much about that at all in terms of the definition behind what a psychedelic is?
Yeah, it's funny because I went from knowing nothing to having this like experience and just obsessing over it. Like, what is this? Like, who like this can help me, over, just researching and diving into it and thinking like, why has nobody said anything about this? Like, this has helped me. Like, is this weird that a drug is, I didn't know anything, so I had to, really dive in at the time.
Mm. That word drug, I was that's the what I was speaking
Yeah,
about to Rory on the last interview, you know, that it just has such a well, I guess it depends in what context you're using it, you know, but it's a generalized word for anything, but you know, that could be from caffeine to heroin and you know, people go drugs when they're talking about
right.
the drugs that are used kind of
It's
recreationally.
it's very funny because I, immersed myself in what are these psychedelics and what are they doing and what is plant medicine and it is from just the very beginning of my research just from an objective point of view made me laugh like so this chemical you made in the lab is a medicine but this is a drug. One thing's a
Mm.
drug and one thing's a medicine depending on how you it's marketed and legally licensed is maybe that's not the best way to distinguish what's a drug and what's a medicine.
It's interesting how we use language to um, conceive a particular picture about something, you know, portray a particular picture about
Language
something.
is magic, man. There's a history of context with language to where you I don't know if you're familiar with Terence McKenna at all,
Oh, dude.
but
He's like one of my guys. I've got a
of course,
poster of him
and
in my living room.
I have
Of
a quote from him today that I really want to share later on.
course.
Towards the end, when you wrote that, I'm like, man, that is so. It's something it's a quote of his that I have in my office, and it's just I've really enjoyed his lectures and stuff like that too. But he speaks about language and its alchemy because if you it's this audible symbol that we've agreed upon, right, to represent something. So in a when you say drug, that word brings up a context from human history and past and all these things that we now agree upon, like what this, kind of like a sharp context with the word drug or any,
I
anything like that sits with us like, oh, drug, like good drug or bad.
I just I literally just finished reading his book, True Hallucinations. Have you read it by any chance?
That's so awesome that you brought that up because I was going to ask you about that. Like, hey, I don't know if you've read this.
Ah, dude, what a
I have
story.
read all of his books, if I'm being honest. All of his major ones. True
Really.
Hallucinations. Um, I don't know if you've read the Archaic Revival.
I haven't read any of his other books yet. I'm going to
Okay,
definitely
cool.
invest in
We'll speak
some.
on that. We'll speak on that, and I'll
Yes.
recommend some for you.
I I actually found it kind of a hard read because you know how articulate he is with like
A bit
I
over
don't
articulate, yes, I get it.
he just uses like metaphors for everything. He's very poetic in his language and sometimes you're like he kind of goes off on a tangent, you know, for a good bit
Right.
of paragraph. Feel, oh, I forgot what we were talking about
It's really good to get lost
here.
in if you vibe with that, and I do sometimes. So I've had a lot of fun with all of his lectures and stuff.
So, how has your life progressed from this first experience with MDMA? I know you said you did a couple of pills after, but did you start taking MDMA consistently for a prolonged period of time, or?
No, no, did a little bit of research, and after two or three times, I was like a little bit afraid, um, because MDMA has one of the most potentials for actual like harm, I would say, for consistent use over and over.
Compared to mushrooms or something like?
Right, right.
Mm.
And it's not bad. It's just, I got a little bit afraid and not knowing, what's in this pill, who has it. And so like I said, I obsessed over these things, just, like this could help me, like, this broke something loose. And I started researching and I'm like, well, I guess I need to find mushrooms. And it's like I'm brand new to this area. I'm not gonna I tried like to ask around, maybe a few friends that I knew in my apartment complex that kind
Mm.
of smoked pot or something. And I just I don't know what it was like, well, I guess I'll do this myself. So I just went hunting on the internet and there's a few, I won't throw anybody under the bus, but there's a few YouTube channels that would, this is like 2016, 17, would just constantly be taken down and make a new one and put their instructional
Mm.
videos up. Like they wanted to teach people how to do this. And I was just obsessed with like figuring out how to do it. And eventually it's kind of ironic, like by the time I got to where I could find some mushrooms to try to help me, I was 2 days away from harvesting my own
Ah.
and was like, you know what? Keep them. It's been a process. So,
Um,
the reason I say that is that just having out of necessity to feel like I could cultivate my own healing here, it opened up a doorway to like 10 years from that, like where I am now, even,
hmm.
just having to learn and figure out how to do that for myself.
And how's how's that going? Did you have a successful grow?
I
I
did,
know.
yeah. I have on and off for quite a while now.
Oh,
I just try to keep enough for myself and for, maybe a few friends or something, but I don't do anything major.
hmm. I had I was saying this to Rory as well in my last interview. When I had my first grow, I didn't know about the bruising. He had a bruising in the stem,
Okay.
and I was gutted because I came to them and I thought it was harvest day, and they were just covered in this blue, what I thought was mold, and I actually
You're like,
chucked most of them away. And
oh no,
yeah,
the
I
strong
ended
blue
up.
ones.
I know. I ended up speaking to a few friends, and the people that I bought the kit off, um, they have a really good like customer service WhatsApp thing, and I was speaking to them and I was sending them photos. And they were like, "Oh no, I hope you haven't chucked them out because they're supposed to bruise. That's
Yeah,
how they
that's
look.
great.
It's not." Anyway, yeah, no, it's really interesting learning about mushrooms. I actually find them fascinating. Just the whole process with the mycelium and all of that.
I yeah, agreed, and that was like when just in hindsight, the fact that I couldn't find them was like a blessing in disguise for me because
Mm.
the focus and hunting down the information and figuring out how to do it for myself was like I needed that to engage with and to feel like I was still in the fight. Like, okay, cool. Like I'll do this myself. Like I'll cultivate my own healing. Like,
Mm.
and that process just completely changed the way I looked at a lot of things and definitely led to where I am now and what I do now.
Did you read another book I haven't read? Did you read McKenna's Grow Guide? Is that where you got your information from?
I
He's got a
have
book.
both of those books right here on the shelf, right
Oh,
behind you.
is that
I
because they've
actually
got?
I actually had a friend kind of redesign the some artwork from that book for a tattoo of mine.
I really, wow. I'm trying to. I'm just remembering from seeing it on the internet. I haven't actually, like I said, read the book. Doesn't he have his own method? And isn't it like using polystyrene or something to put over the top? Do you know what I'm
It's
talking
very
about?
old school. It's actually like growing from jars. It's like a maybe an early version of what people would call like the PF Tech, like the BRF cakes, kind of like that. He's growing
Okay.
directly from the jars, and he had like a covering, I believe. Like you said, like
Bubble
the low
wrap.
humidity.
Isn't it
Yeah,
bubble wrap? Yes,
I want to
not
say maybe it was bubble wrap, but
polystyrene.
it was they were using boxes. I just remember like seeing boxes with in some of the old grow techniques they had instead of tubs, they had boxes with trash bags in them.
Wow. We're so like lucky to have I know books have been around for a while, but just having the internet, like you want to learn how to grow mushrooms, you go on Google and it'll or go on YouTube and there'll be a video there. You just got access
Yeah,
to
I mean,
you just
I
do it all
knew absolutely
yourself.
nothing about it, man. I knew nothing. I just knew that after read like having the experiences I had and reading what I read, like I knew that it could help me in some way, and I just went looking, and the information was there. It took a
Mm.
lot of work, but the information's there.
Can you imagine what life was like before all of that? I mean, I rely too much on, for example, like Google Maps just to get around. And my granddad, who's like, he's 80 now, but he still drives around with a big map. And as a result, because he's had to figure that out. He knows every road, but you
Right.
don't take that information in when you're just following that blue line. So it kind of almost does you a disservice. We don't need as much intelligence as we did because
You
we've.
know, and I often wonder just because of the nature of my job and having to use my phone and computer and all this stuff constantly, like how much convenience is this and how much of this could I do manually by just writing something out sometimes like
Mm.
sometimes I feel like we create our own stressors that way.
It's only going to get more advanced as well, man. I mean, everything's just. It seems that the more. I mean, I don't know if you use ChatGPT at all. I use it all the time. It's
I do,
since
yeah.
it.
I actually just I had a coworker like show me to use some with admin work, and it's pretty wild, like how easy it can make some things.
And it's getting like more and more crazy. Like I don't know when it first came out. It's probably a few years ago now. But now I pay for the Chat GPT 4, and if you don't already know, you can like video around the room, and it will describe to you what it's seeing. It's crazy. It's crazy where that technology's going. Anyway, sorry, I went off on a bit of a tangent there. I wanted to talking about the MDMA and asking you if you were taking it. Consistently. The reason for that was I did my fair share of MDMA back when I was a child. Well, not a child, but a young adult. um,
I'm like, cool kid, man. That's amazing.
and whilst back in my partying years, and whilst I remember the overdose of love and just this
Right,
euphoric feeling, what I also remember is the next day and the absolute depletion of serotonin and
right.
the just being feeling lower than ever, right? Like a come down. I don't know if you call it a come down as well. What I wanted to ask you was when you were doing the MDMA, it doesn't sound like you were doing it for very long, so maybe this isn't relevant to what you've experienced. But I was going to ask how you battled the come downs. Like, were you actually not taking enough to have a come down, or yeah, what was the situation there?
Yeah. In fact, I would say that MDMA probably has one of the worst come downs.
Like
Um,
really bad, dude. Like,
yeah, really bad. But that's one of the reasons that I shied away from it. I'm very
mm,
practical in the way that I was like, man, that feels too good to be true. And the next
mm.
day, you kind of see that it is somewhat with, I think that MDMA has a really, really good potential to be like a microdosed in with some like therapeutic doses of LSD or mushrooms or something to keep people, more positive or just I don't know. I think that in large doses it can be very dangerous. I just knew that it felt too good to be true, and I kind of trusted that instinct.
I hear you. I actually, as I said, I'm doing like a psychology degree, and on one of the chapters I've just finished doing, um, it was showing a graph of drugs and how they are perceived at the moment in terms of, how you guys have like schedule one, schedule two. Is that how it
Right.
works? We have like class A, class B.
Okay.
And there was a member of parliament in our government years ago. I think his name was Nutter, and he reorganized. He proposed a new model because the way we categorize drugs at the moment isn't actually based on any scientific evidence. It's I think it was when the war on drugs kind of was taking place in the 60s, they just kind of categorized them. But this Nutter guy, he actually reorganized drugs in terms of how much damage they cause to the individual and then to society. And MDMA was quite high up the list, and alcohol was at the top, which is interesting, right? Because it's so normalized. But mushrooms were right at the bottom, like they were the last one. So
Right.
um, that's kind of my thought process as well. What you were saying about, MDMA doesn't kind of seem the safest option and like the most,
Right.
but
It doesn't
mushrooms,
seem sustainable.
no, it doesn't. And I'm going to be interviewing an MDMA therapist soon, and I'm really interested to ask her about how they dose it, and also does that I imagine it wouldn't give you a come down if you're having that small a dose, but that's something that
Right. And
uh,
I'm sure in a medical setting it's a lot more reasonable than it would be in, you know, people partying with MDMA.
absolutely totally different scenario. Um, Coming on to my favorite topic, mushrooms. We were talking very briefly on FaceTime about the history of mushrooms, and you showed me the I've got it written down here. What was it called? Oh no, I haven't. Documentary. What's that documentary called?
I showed you Hamilton's Pharmacopoeia,
Yes,
which is
dude.
a huge, I mean, everybody is, that knows anything about psychedelics is probably a fan of that. It's
I think they
a
are. I
great,
don't
they
know.
have a great, spread of information, I would say. It's a really cool overview. It's a good, like, ode to, current psychedelic information.
I must have had my head stuck in the sand because I've never heard of it, and it's right up my street. I was watching the DMT one. I watched the mushroom one. It's fascinating, and he was on Joe Rogan as well. So yeah, you got me watching hours worth of YouTube. Yeah, you were telling me briefly about the history with Robert Gordon Wasson and how his research that he brought to the West introduced us to mushrooms. Do you want to elaborate a bit on that and tell us a bit more?
Sure. Obviously, I'm not an expert. I
No,
just,
no.
I just obsessed over growing and figuring out how to do it because I felt that it could help me. And I think, in a lot of ways, I felt like, man, when you have those first initial psychedelic experiences, they open up a world for you. And I just thought, like, think of all the vets I could help with this, like,
Mm.
as far as I understand, he was the first to really introduce the Western world in Life magazine to mushrooms. He went to South America. I don't remember. I want to say it's probably around the Oaxaca area where mushrooms and salvia are very, prominent in that area. Um, and actually, from what I hear, the misconception is that he was, discovering these things, but his wife was actually the mycologist. She was a
Oh,
mycologist. His wife, her name was Valentina, but they were a team, and they wrote this long article about magic mushrooms to, and kind of introduced them to the Western world. And I would say after that, it was more the exposure more or less came from Terence McKenna.
mm. The I'm trying to think. The lady was Maria Sabina. That's her name.
Yes,
You familiar with her?
yes,
She's the one that shared the information, right?
correct. Yeah, that's where I was telling you when we talked. Even currently, like you see on uh, I'm sure you saw on the Hamilton's Pharmacopoeia episode, there's still places in South America that are currently mixing Catholicism with, mushrooms and salvia right now.
Mm,
And they were colonized by the Spanish, way back in the day, and it was kind of their way of holding on to some of their indigenous beliefs to keep the mushroom around.
mm. And it's crazy that Maria Sabina had no idea of the impact she would have on the Western world. And I was doing a bit of research because I just thought it was fascinating and I'd never heard of her. And I found that she later came to regret that decision because not only did
Correct.
she, yeah, she didn't gain financially from it, and she was living in poverty. And shortly
She
after,
actually was a little bit exiled from her own community for bringing so many tourists and
from the
stuff like that.
Maztec
She kind of
community,
was
right?
right.
The Maztec community, I think that's what it is.
M- yes, the
Tribe.
Mazatec.
But they had big names coming over like John Lennon, Mick Jagger,
Right.
Bob Dylan, and it was all just getting crazy, and everybody was partying and using them as recreationally, and it devastated her because she believed that the mushrooms were sacred, and supposed to be used for that purpose only. So I've got a quote here from her. Where are we? I think this is one of the last quotes she made before she passed away. From the moment the foreigners arrived to search for God, the saint children, meaning the mushrooms, lost their purity. The force was lost. They were profaned. And she died in 1985. Very sad, actually, really,
Yeah,
the
very.
story. What is it about humans and fucking things up? It's crazy.
Yeah, it's like you don't know when to let a good thing be a good thing sometimes. And I think
Mm.
that we're we're just monkeys pushing that pleasure button a lot of times. And I think we forget to attribute meaning
Mm.
to some of the things that are the most significant.
Mm. Well, regardless of the sad beginnings, we now have access to this medicine, and the world of contemporary science is starting to take their healing properties seriously. So, have you got any stories about your experiences on mushrooms and what they've done for you, and how that compares to your experiences on MDMA?
Sure, MDMA was just more emotional, more euphoric, and more like, oh, I could be a little bit feel a little bit normal again. I don't know where this quote came from, but you know, every time I see it pop up on Reddit, other places, like it makes so much sense. To me, mushrooms are teachers. And where's that? What do they say? Yeah, mushrooms are, they don't do the work, they assign the homework. I don't know if you've heard that.
No, but I'm gonna get that tattooed somewhere.
They, yeah, they assign the homework. And I think that where mushrooms different is that they ask something of you. They ask that you do the work. They ask that you see from these different angles and then do the work to change things and maybe address some of the things where you've maybe not treated people well or treated yourself well even. They ask you to for something to come of it. It's not just feel good happy,
Mm.
and they can be in small doses and stuff like that, but I think that they do ask you to improve, to do some work, to feel better about yourself by doing better.
How are you taking the mushrooms these days? Do you do like heroic doses or do you microdose? What's your method?
I do a mix. I'm very busy with work, and I can do when I say microdoses, I think that some people are even to this day still unaware how micro a microdose is. To me, a microdose is a quarter gram or less for mushrooms. It's functional. I could go through you know, a meeting or something, I can do everyday things on a real microdose, something that's subperceptual.
Mm.
And then what I like to do is I like to just instinctually be like, man, I'm struggling with mental fog and maybe some of these things, and I'll do a macrodose. I will make time to be by myself to do the inner work. I think that it's an ongoing thing. And I think that I've healed a lot of, really deep wounds with psychedelics and macrodoses and large tripping, but I think it's an ongoing thing to direction your everyday evolution. You're, evolving to a new person every day. And just to be conscious about how am I treating people? How am I treating myself? How am I, where are my intentions?
I feel you. I was just doing a an essay on personality, and it's very interesting that people get so hung up on identifying with their personalities. And actually, when you try to define the word, it's very difficult because you're, as you said, constantly adapting. And I
Right.
think
You're talking about the word personality, correct?
yes,
Okay, yeah. It is very, it's just it's vague the way you can even describe it. It's like, oh, that's just how they are. That's, what does that mean?
what does that mean? Like, we're all on a scale. I mean, it was using the example of being like calling someone an introvert. It's more like they're low down on the introvert scale. But as
Right.
far as from their perspective, there's probably someone that's more introverted, and they would call that person an introvert. So there's
And
not
see,
like
that's where I get hung up to with just maybe Western medicine in general is the blanket applications of like this chemical could help these people and this could and I think that one of the things that is unique about psychedelics is that they are unique to the person because each person's mental health and everything is unique to them. You can express it in every way possible to a therapist or the people you love, but at the end of the day, it's a very personal internal thing. And I think that psychedelics address that infinite uniqueness of each person and it speaks in the language of your own, if that makes sense.
Mhm. And I find that sometimes you can like hear a lesson, you could be taught something, and you can comprehend what someone's saying. I've found that mushrooms have actually helped me to embed that and actually understand that. And what I'm referring to is just going back to what I was just saying about how you don't identify with with yesterday. Like the person you were yesterday is not who you are today. And when using the mushrooms has actually allowed me to release a lot of guilt that I've built up from looking back and thinking, oh, I probably shouldn't have done that, or I could have done that differently. You're not that person anymore. You learn from that, and this is a constant state of evolving. And when you actually think about that, it's quite reassuring and humbling, and you can just let go of you make mistakes all the time, and you learn, and you don't do it again. And
Right.
mushrooms have just
And
helped me realize that.
for sure. And I think that just being able to look inward with that kind of stuff a lot of people have anxiety from where they think that, everybody's judging them. But when you get to the core of it, they're judging themselves the hardest. And I definitely have been guilty of that. And I think that, you know, psychedelics will bring up things from your past, your childhood, and part of like forgiving people in your lives can definitely entail yourself and
Mm.
how you've acted and the way you've treated people and I don't think that's a bad thing. I think that it's just very alien in 2025 for people to stop and think like, how am I treating other people? And I think that that comes from some of the like McKenna talks about culture is not your friend because
Mm.
culture is telling you this is appropriate and this isn't appropriate instead of doing what we innately have inside of us to stop and think like, does that feel right? Does that, I think a lot of us take our direction and cues from social media and outside world.
We're very I was reading a book from a guy called Dale Vince, who's a businessman over here, and he was talking about this. And I like his little phrase. He was saying we're tribal people. We've got our group and we have social norms and we behave in a
Yes, there's
particular
and
way.
who tell me who that was again?
So I don't think you'd have heard of him. His name's Dale Vince, and
Okay.
he's in the renewable sector. He's completely different to nothing to do with psychedelics. But he just when you were what you were mentioning there about kind of social norms and rather than thinking for yourself, we get so caught up with fitting in that we kind of forget about. what we actually want to pursue, you know?
Right. And I kind of didn't mention this earlier, but during, part of those first few MDMA experiences was I think I told you this maybe previously. I don't have regular social media. I quit.
Mm.
And it's not that I think everybody should do that. I just think that I reached a point where I wanted to know what I thought because I got everybody else's opinions and I got everybody else's feelings and what they think that you should think and what they think you should feel. And at a certain point, I stopped and thought, like, well, what do I think?
You know, I'm so guilty for that because dude, I'm just obsessed with my Instagram. You know, I'm always putting stories on and I'm constantly looking to see who's watched it. And it's a whole kind of um, a reward system, right? Like people are
Right. Instant
liking and
gratification
watching
in a lot of ways.
and also I've also been on the other side of seeing how other people's lives are panning out, and you forget that they're just nobody uploads the bad stuff. You know, they upload
Right.
the
It's
holiday.
a
You
very
know,
very trimmed, presentable story that
and it's
people like
very
to
easy.
portray. And I think at some point it wasn't like a me looking at them and thinking like, oh, well, that's not true. It was more like a less of a cringe of like I felt bad. Like I saw people I loved portraying to be okay that I knew maybe they weren't okay. And it was like,
Mm,
this isn't authentic. And I think that psychedelics definitely bring you to a place where if you want anything, you want to be authentic and you want to, to have true relation.
mm. I Social media is it's actually we don't really look at it in this way normally, but it is an addiction. You know, like
Oh,
in
definitely.
my heart of hearts, I'd like to quit social media, and if I could stop right now, then I would. You know, I can see the benefit of not having it, but I'm not. You know, and it's
I think that there's a middle ground for all of that. Like you're obviously I really enjoyed your last podcast with your
ah,
guest Rory, and
thank you.
just in general, I think that there's good applications, and then there's some that we use just for just brain rot scrolling. I see that, I get that. I still have Reddit and some other things too. So
I I actually really enjoy Reddit. You can literally ask any question, can't you? And there's nothing that's not answered on Reddit. You know, it's just this Bible of human knowledge. It's that's how we met, actually, isn't it?
right.
That's how we met. I coming back to the mushrooms. Do you
Hey,
have
do you
a
mind if
favorite?
I take a quick restroom break before you go on there?
I need to as well. I'm so glad you said that. Yes, we'll be back.
Great.
Strain of mushroom. What do you grow?
I think my favorite over time has been Golden Teacher, but they're all pretty much variations of psilocybin cubensis. You know that.
Hmm.
Um, the strain that I grow is just something that I've been running for a long time and keeping alive with mycelium, and it's very contam resistant because of how long I've had it around, and I just pretty much run those. I get a few random spore syringes here or there just to try something new. But I have the one main, just one main strain that I run.
Have you ever tried Makilla Grilla by any chance? Have you ever tried that?
I
Heard of
have
that?
not. I have heard of it.
I people have different opinions on this, and I'd be interested to hear what you think. Like initially I was like, there can't be any difference in what they do. Like it's just more or less psilocybin, and I think I'm still kind of inclined to feel like that now. But like Makilla Grilla for me, it's like it's not as harsh, and I use Makilla Grilla for microdosing and dosing, like you said. You know, and it's like for me, microdosing, it's like I have pills, like I have like zero point 0.3 of a gram in there. So I
Yep.
would use it for microdosing, but then I would also use it for like I could quite easily have 2 grams of this Makilla Grilla, and I wouldn't be gone, but I wouldn't be sober. I'd be at that point where I am at ultimate productiveness. I can socialize. I can.
Right. You
Do you know
want to
what?
you want to clean everything and fix everything and organize everything in your life. That
It's brilliant, though, isn't it? How
it
how
is
you
good.
can.
It is. There are
Ah.
again, I agree. There are different thresholds, and I try to, I try not to use it too recreationally, but there are definitely days that I know I'm going to have a 10, 12 hour day and I need to be very sharp. And those will be the days that it's a quarter gram or less. It's very, very
Mm,
small, subperceptual, but it definitely can add like mental clarity and sharpness and a little bit of just overall mental endurance.
mm, absolutely. I'm super interested to see how this all comes out in research, because it's supposed to have, they're supposed to have like kind of, sorry, they're suggested that they might have long-term benefits, like you do psilocybin, and then
Right.
6 months later, there's reports, studies of people who are still
Neuroplasticity and neurogenesis.
all of that good stuff. I This is not a question I had for you, but it's just come to my mind. You don't have to answer it. Do you have a spiritual side? Have mushrooms enhanced your spiritual side, or are you not religious at all? Where are you at with that?
Yeah. So I grew up just very old school Christian. And, as I got older, I just poked too many holes in it to be serious about it. And then I would say, if anything, mushrooms have brought me around to be more at peace with that, the Christianity, any of that, even like uh definitely more spiritual. And definitely, I just think that there's a certain ineffable part about psychedelics, like they say, that you can't explain to somebody. And there's something more tangible about spirituality and and even the odd way that I came to be comfortable with like what I had thought and perceived growing up as religion and spirituality, that brings something very tangible to the table
Mm,
for you. And I would say definitely. And if there's anything that it's part of or, akin to my personal belief now or religion, it's definitely, psychedelic adjacent.
mm. I like. It's a difficult one. I would not describe myself as religious, or I wasn't before doing mushrooms. But after experiencing the kind of things that I have, and especially on DMT, I don't know if that's something that you've ever tried.
I have I
DMT is
several
quite
times,
a
yes.
different story, right?
It is. It definitely is.
But the things that you perceive, it's not explicable, but it makes sense when you're there. But you're witnessing something that doesn't make sense in terms of what we currently understand, and that is has really sparked my what else could it be? Like just some
Mhm.
extraordinary length of the ability of the brain. But I don't really align with a particular religion. They're also different. I mean, how are you supposed to know which one's right? And you'll find that most people belong to the religion that they grew up around in terms of their culture. No, nobody.
Right.
Well,
And
yeah. Sorry, go on.
I I again feel as far as like spirituality and religion is just innately akin to your mental health in the way that that is very personable and very unique. And I think that I don't know. I think that is the one key factor for psychedelics is that they can tackle that one thing that we can't all explain. It's like
This
this
oneness.
world is one flavor for one person in their perception, and it's a completely another for the other.
Mm. It's super interesting. I mean, I ponder over the big questions all the time. Just like what was before the Big Bang? How did time? Scientists say, oh, time wasn't a thing before the Big Bang, and it just started. And they kind of say that, but it's like, what do you mean by that? Like, what was
Right.
before? That doesn't make sense. How could time break down? I mean, that's we're saying break down, but what do you actually mean? It's like we don't. All these crazy questions that don't make sense, and the fact that space just goes on forever, and if it doesn't, well, what's on the other side of that? And these questions that don't make sense. That is the kind of thing that sparks my spirituality, and it makes me think maybe there is more. And when I say more, I don't even know what I mean by that, but more
Right.
than we understand or
And
know.
I went on a just a small kick of I mean, I don't know how familiar you are with Christianity,
Not like, I mean, go ahead. I'm not that familiar, but I
but
mean,
if you were to take away, you know, all your pre-suggestions and maybe only read in the Bible the words that Jesus speaks, they're pretty psychedelic and they're very universally spiritual. And I think that if you go to different um, religions and different areas of the world, the teacher that they have in their belief system speaks a lot of the same universal truths of where I am you and you are me. This is the separation is an illusion, basically.
I totally liaise with that. Um, in terms of the therapeutic effects for your PTSD, I mean, just going back to what you said right at the start. So it's been 10 years now. So do you no longer have PTSD? And when you did have PTSD, if the answer to that is no, I don't have it, how did the mushrooms help? Did they like alleviate your symptoms to the point where you were fully functioning in society and it was almost like there was no PTSD? I mean, what did they do for you?
Yeah, I think that even part of like speaking about like being able to look inward and have compassion and like even have compassion for myself when I'm feeling like something triggering or something and be like, it's okay. I can walk away from that.
Hmm.
Or not feeling embarrassed about something triggering me or just kind of having a little bit of compassion for myself. I think that I've for the most part just alleviated any of that. And I don't know that anybody is completely devoid of like, oh, I had PTSD and I'm better now. Or I think that it's more of a scale or a spectrum, like you were saying, as far as everybody has traumas in their lives, and we're all acting out these wounds in subperceptual ways that sometimes we don't even understand. So I think that overall, I've just become more aware of that, and sometimes I see little inklings in other people that I'm like, I could help them feel comfortable, or if you recognize it in yourself, you'll start to recognize it in others.
I I think it's amazing. I mean, I think this is why so much research is going into psychedelics because not only are they alleviating traumatic symptoms, but they are improving your mood. And
Right.
as far as PTSD goes, like as you were saying earlier on, they're showing to increase the efficiency of neuroplasticity and help break harmful thought
And I
patterns.
don't want to portray like the social media thing like we were talking about earlier. Like it's all better. Here I am, like doing great every single day. Like this is a tool, and like I said, this is an avenue for you to work on yourself. And they, wherever that quote came from, I love it. It's they don't do the work, they assign the homework.
That's brilliant. I'm going to write that
And
down. Tell me afterwards because
and
I want to.
it it's one of those things where I can see myself falling into ruts. I'm still human. I still have challenges every day and things that get me down and stuff like that. It's just that I have a tool now that's it's like, man, I'm feeling like I'm in this rut. I need to really just call everything off on this one day. I have this day off work. Like I'm gonna call everything off. I'm gonna wake up in the morning and I'm gonna dose and I'm gonna sit with that and laugh or cry or
Mm.
wherever that takes, whatever it needs. Like I need to open that up and figure out what it's going to take to get me out of this rut. And it's a tool. It's not a solution.
So, if you were to reflect back over the years and evaluate the quality of your life, how does the Tanner of today compare with Tanner pre-psychedelics?
Um, just more aware, more empathetic, um, more comfortable being my own self, I would say. and just more aware of like some of the foolish, like, almost embarrassing ways I treated people in my past. I know you've probably dealt with that
Mhm.
in psychedelics. Like and a lot of times you revisit some of the things like that have hurt you and the way people have hurt you, and you'll find compassion for them when you're tripping and stuff like that. But a lot of times it's the opposite of you come to a place where all of a sudden it's bringing something up like, man, I just didn't treat this person well, and I was just
Mm.
kind of an asshole. Like and so I think that now at where I am now is like at least at a place to deal with that and make peace with how I've acted and how I can act now, and see the possibility of like this I could show compassion. I could even show compassion to myself a little bit here.
Mm. So, like, what practical elements does this emotional regulation help you with in terms of, um, like you were saying, your relationships? Does it help you to have more empathy? Have you got a partner or a what's your
No,
situation?
not right now. I'm divorced. I divorced a few years back.
Oh, okay. But
I
friends
would
and
just in general, I think that it gives you the ability to just be more patient and see yourself and others' actions a lot. You know what I mean?
mm,
Instead of being, I think a lot of times we get caught up in ego and just me, and this is all happening to me. When sometimes you'll stop and see like, oh man, like there's something going on with this person. Like maybe they need a hand, or that
I hear you. So one thing that I'm really interested to talk to you about, if you're happy to move on to that, is your cultivation career.
sure,
Um, you are a cultivation manager at a
yeah, I
marijuana cultivation
yeah I
facility. I mean, what do you call it?
yeah, it's a large cannabis farm. It's all legal. It's all for recreational and medical use here. And basically, what that means for me is that I supervise a large group of people that work in the greenhouses and actually on the plants.
Mm,
Um, so just to take a step back of like how some of that leads to this is, I wasn't really interested that much in cultivation until I had to figure out how to grow those mushrooms myself.
mm,
And then I'm thinking like, well, I started to dabble with marijuana as well. Like maybe I could grow this as well. If I could do this, then I could do this, and just started dabbling with it a little bit. And I came to a place where I was about to leave the town I'm in after my divorce, and the opportunity just kind of fell at my feet for this startup for this cannabis company. And everything at the time was entry level because they nobody worked there yet. They were just building the farm. They had
oh,
one of the
brand new.
one of the six greenhouses had plants in them, and so I came
Wow.
in kind of at the ground level. And what that did was give me a huge opportunity to take what I had taught myself, from the internet, growing plant, and just learn from people. There's people that came from different farms and other places, and like the other supervisor that I worked with, he had been working in the industry, a few years before that, and had more knowledge with the industry and stuff like that. And I was able to just jump in at the ground level and build with the company. And today I want to say between me and the other supervisor, we have 50 cultivation workers that work for us.
Wow. You got in early, so
And
you're quite high up the chain now.
right. And
Mm.
so what that is they take care of the plant maintenance, overall healthcare of the plant. Like they trim and defoliate and just care for the plants.
And as a manager, do you ever tend to the plants yourself, or are you just overseeing everybody else doing it, if that makes
I
sense?
do. Anytime there's question or something, we come and look at stuff like that. But I started actually just straight entry level with that farm. Well, and this is only a few years ago. So I'm very familiar with all the actual plant work that they do, but as of now, I don't do a whole lot of hands-on as much as I do teaching. I'll do hands-on teaching and
Wow.
showing people, how to take care of the plants and stuff like that.
So, like, what's for somebody like me who knows nothing about marijuana cultivation, what's the process like in training? Is it how long did it take you to kind of get the hang of it? If that is there a lot to it? I imagine there is.
It's from going from like small home grows and having, plants in my backyard and stuff like that to an industry. It's very large scale and it's not as detail oriented. So it's a lot more to juggle and it's a lot more people managing, I guess, than you would imagine at my level, just because there's so many plants and so many people to take care of them.
Hmm. And if it's a large commercial farm, I mean, are you able to share with us like how many plants there are? Can you tell us that kind of
Sure, yeah,
information?
especially, I won't share who I work for or anything like that,
No.
but we have six greenhouses. Each one of those greenhouses takes 8,000 plants.
Wow, that's a lot. That's
Yeah.
a lot. That's
And
more than
we
I was
have about,
expecting.
yeah, so we have about 16 to 20 in the nursery getting ready to replace those as we harvest them. And we harvest 8,000 about every 11 days, 12 days.
Wow.
Yeah,
Wow.
it's very big. It's a new company for this state, but it was established in other states that had legalized previously years before.
So, what kind of, you said it's medical cannabis. What does that actually mean? Like, is it, what kind of strain is it? Obviously, it's psilocybe cubensis, right? Or not
Oh
psilocybe,
no,
sorry, that's not what I meant at all. Not psilocybe cubensis. Obviously, what kind of strain? Yeah, sorry, I had mushrooms in my head for
no
a
worries.
second there. What strain of marijuana do you guys grow?
We have the strains or cultivars, as they call them, are there's a lot, and that's part of like the mark. We for a while here in Arizona, and it's what you have to understand about the U.S. is that technically my job is federally illegal.
Oh, okay.
I work under state regulation, and by choice at any time, the feds could shut us down. It's federally illegal marijuana, but it is
Yeah.
recreationally and medically legal in the state, and the states have their own rights. So I'm state licensed to grow and work on these facilities and work for the company I work for, and we're state licensed to distribute to the state licensed dispensaries and all that. But technically, this is all still federally illegal.
That's just so we don't have anything like that here. You know, it's
Right.
like the
Yeah.
law is the
Yes.
law.
Things make more sense, I'm sure.
Um, so like in terms of operating a grow that size, I imagine there's some extensive planning and preparation that goes into that. Are you involved with that part of it, or do you just kind of oversee everybody working?
A little bit, yeah. A little, especially now, as things are evolving and they're trying to grow and stuff. I'm a little bit more involved in the planning because it washes out to me and the people who work in the greenhouses and work on the plants. So yeah, a little bit of that. Um, at at its basis, it's a lot of people are shocked that work there or only work there for a short amount of time because they realize they show up and it's like it's all good vibes and a lot of people smoke weed and it's great, but it's still a farm and it's a
You're not
business and
standing around getting high all
it's
day.
still a lot of actual like farm work. It's still farm work and it's can be like labor intensive.
So do you get like free examples? Do you smoke these days yourself, or do you stay away
Oh
from it?
yeah, for sure I do. Again, it's a plant medicine and it can be easily abused. I've abused it, of course, but I think that the old saying, the difference between medicine and poison is in the dose.
Mm. Mm.
I definitely smoke and I have my own home grow. I, you know, work on my own genetics and things that I like with my home grow because I can do that legally here
Mm.
for myself as well. So I do smoke. I do get free samples.
Wow.
Um,
Perks.
yeah, there's some perks. Yeah.
It's so alien to me because, like I said, marijuana is completely illegal here, and well, I guess people are prescribed it for medical use, but it's not like the concept of a marijuana farm is something that's just commonly
Now,
spoken about. And
now you say that
now,
about the
yeah,
UK. I'm not aware if in the UK you have a medical prescription. Where do they assume you get that from? Do they have dispensaries? Do
yeah.
they?
Well, this is the thing, right? Like
And
I was
see,
just thinking,
this is reminding me of early marijuana prohibition, like in the US, where it's like, okay, well, here's your state license, but there's no dispensaries. So how do you suppose that I get this? You know, there's all these gray areas, and it's just funny to me that it's coming out and evolving, and it's going to be legalized and whatever, but
hmm. I'm sure they're
just
probably
the
dotted up
technicalities
and
are very wild.
I'm sure they're probably dotted up and down the UK. It's just so stigmatized, you know. It's
Right.
not a thing that people speak about. It's not like something you'd speak about at the dinner table. You know, you speak to your friends
Man,
about it, of course, but
when I think about the first time I had a medical card, which was, right during that time that I had first tried the MDMA and stuff like that, 2016-ish, 17, somewhere in there. Um, I had just got a medical card. And when I think about where it is now recreationally legal here in Arizona, and just, man, it has been so much more relaxed, and it's just the last 10 years. So if they give any sort of foothold there for you guys to legalize, it'll be, a
mm.
perpetual relaxation, and people will see that, oh, okay, this isn't that bad. Like,
Well, you know, once again, going back to my degree before the personality stuff, I was learning about drugs and how we perceive people who take drugs, and you know, it's perceived to be a criminal offense, and we should really treat things like that from a more
it just
empathetic side,
it
you
tears
know,
it apart
like.
when you start researching that, okay, the same people who are profiting from the legal drugs are the same people making these laws telling you that your drugs are illegal or these plants are illegal.
Mm.
And I think to make nature or a plant illegal is just it's absurd. I think that's wild. I think
It is bizarre.
it
It's
should
very
stir
bizarre.
something in you emotionally and spiritually to be told that this plant is illegal. And I think
Mm.
it's a very slippery slope.
It's like, well, who are you? I'm a grown man. I have my own ability to
Or
think, and you
who
know.
I don't know what whether you believe in God, the universe, nature. To me, those are all the different words for the same thing.
Hmm.
And for you to say that part of that is illegal is a little bit crazy to me.
Totally agree, man. How have you found smoking marijuana with? Sorry, just to go back. Yeah, so you don't have PTSD. Sorry, you did say. So it's kind of hard. It's not like you have or you don't have PTSD. It's kind of like this ongoing thing. So how do you find smoking marijuana with, with any of the side effects that maybe you still, the symptoms that you still have?
I mean,
Does
the reason I
it
brought up
benefit
like
you?
dosing too is that, like, man, I'm so busy with work, and a lot of, when you tell people what you do as far as like cultivation and stuff, they think that it's like a big party, and it's not. It's still a job, and there's investors and there's people who expect you to do well and grow crops and stuff like that. So in small amounts, man, it's great to take the edge off and to keep you calm and present, and I think you can do a lot of things with just intention in general, like how you're using things. But I can't smoke a joint and go into work and try to,
Mm.
go through a work meeting or something. That's not how, but I'm using weed every day. Of course, I smoke every day, but I think it's more or less how you use it and your relationship with it, just like any other medicine.
It's having that self-discipline. I mean, I must admit, I've had a really negative experience with marijuana, so it really interests me to speak to people who have
Right.
had a
And
positive.
I try to be very open. Like I smoke even to this day, maybe an abusive amount of marijuana because I have so much access to it. but just being aware of where your relationship is with these plant medicines in general is very important. It's like just based on effectiveness too. Like that LSD and mushrooms, they have cross tolerance, but they do have tolerance in general with your serotonin
Mm.
receptors, and something very similar with your cannabinoid system as well. So for me, what I try to tell people is like it's great that we're in 2025 with the strongest weed you've ever smoked or anyone's ever seen. You know what I mean? But take that into consideration. Like, are you going to wear that system out in your body? Because I know that every time I take a break or something and come back to it, I'm like, man, I feel a little bit guilty because I'll come back and smoke some marijuana and be like, oh, this is medicine, and I should be using this a lot wiser. If you take a little break and then come back, your reverence for that medicine is still there.
Mm. She's a sneaky little substance, mate. Like a couple of
It
drags, and
is.
she'll give
It's
you
so
this.
nice. It's so nice, and it is, but again, that goes back to like that inkling I got with MDMA is that, too much of a good thing is not a good thing. It's um, if you can save it for the stormy weather, man, it's a great tool.
Mm. Like a couple of tokes, and she'll give you this enhanced creativity and this poetic tongue, but a couple more drags, and you wake up on your mate's sofa with brain fog, a dry mouth, no job, and an
Right.
overdraft. And I just can't find that balance. I've never been able to find that balance.
Right. And
I
and I think that's really wise though. That shows that that's mature to show that like, I don't dance with Mary Jane too often because, it derails me. That's okay.
well,
It's something that's they're very much like staple for me, but again, it's been very opportunistic in general for me, obviously with how legal it is and growing it at home and growing it at work
mm.
and
We all have our poison, and I imagine I wouldn't want to say this. I don't know what the statistics are, but the average person who has an addictive personality, I would assume alcohol is the thing, right? Most people have alcohol is the issue. I've never had a problem with alcohol, but if I get a whiff of
really
cannabis,
even with your service time.
no, I've never had. I can drink in excess. I can get smashed. I could
And
drink all
see,
week, and I wouldn't
and
be.
see, it's I'm definitely more addictive with weed to the point where I'll just do it habitually because it feels nice. Or alcohol is one of those things where I drank you know years and years, just 2-3 years straight when I was in the military. You know how that is,
Mm,
but in the barracks and or whatever you guys call it there.
in the barracks, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, just barracks parties and drinking and all that. And when it came time to not really drink as much anymore, it wasn't as much of an issue. I just don't enjoy it as much as it was a means to an end to numb, if
Mm.
that makes sense.
Dude, I remember
So
like
like
coming in. Sorry, go on.
so like now I can I can have a few drinks with coworkers or something. I just don't really enjoy it. I kind of, it wore out its welcome with my youth, I would say.
No, I'm in totally the same boat, and it wouldn't have been alien for me to like walk into my mate's room on like a Wednesday afternoon at 4 o'clock, and he'd be sat there with a bottle of whiskey watching telly, like, and
Oh
it's
yeah.
just
I
like,
mean, playing Xbox, after
yeah.
work and just, in the barracks drinking every night. It was just, very commonplace.
I am since I've been microdosing mushrooms. I don't know if you saw on my interview with Rory, but I was talking about how I had a 10-year problem with marijuana, and I could not stop, and I was smoking it, and I wanted to stop, but I would rather be high than sober, even though it's causing me all these problems with my relationships and my emotions and my productivity. And I actually 3 months in from the microdosing, I just went cold turkey on the marijuana, and I've been free from marijuana now for it's something like 10 months. I've been microdosing for about
Okay.
a year. So, and I just think that's fascinating because the point I was making to Rory was I didn't realize that one of the supposed benefits of microdosing is it helps you to get over addictions. And
It
this is
does.
something that
Yes.
I've been trying to deal with for years. And There we
Right,
go. Proof in the pudding right there, you know? Um,
right.
I don't know about you. I really struggle with productivity. I mean, if I'm smoking weed, even if I just smoked it a little bit on the weekend, that would be me for the week, not being high, but I would have no motivation to do anything apart from go to work. I can still go to work and
Oh,
function, but I'd be coming home and sitting on my ass and doing nothing, you know? Like,
right. And I think it's one of those things too where if you're recognizing that it's not working for you, that's great. I and especially psychedelics, I don't recommend them for everybody. I don't. And I think that I rolled the dice and won with doing things on my own and doing it all personally, but I think that the future is really going to come with like microdosing and like somewhat macrodosing with a therapist or a guide or something like that. And I think
mhm.
that um, right now with the legalization and stuff like that, with weed is as strong as it's ever been. And I think that finding that happy medium for people, like if I'm being honest with you, I have struggled with the same, just in general productivity. And not so much during the day. If I take a few puffs or like microdose amounts during the day, not for pain, something like that, CBD, something like that doesn't. But for me, like even to this day, I don't come home and smoke. I have a few things that I need to do. I have my own little home grow to tend to, and I have,
You got a lot
you
going
know,
on, yeah.
yeah, I have other stuff too. So for me, like that doesn't, at the end of the day, that doesn't come until that stuff's done. And it's almost like
Mm,
a sinking in the same way someone would have a nightcap with,
mm. Do you have like a creative side? And the reason I ask is I found that marijuana has helped me with that. I mean, maybe your cultivation is your creative side. Do you play an instrument or do you
it
write
is,
or anything
and
like that?
it is though, cultivation is something that if you work with me or know me, I obsess over it in ways that most people would not, care to. There's been times where people are like, well, do you want to do this weekend? And I'm like, oh, I have this grow going and it's almost done. I have a few more days before it's finished. And to me, that is art. And it's just to take part in what nature does really well and try
Mm,
to, make the conditions well for it to grow well. That's art to me too. But I play guitar. I paint a little bit.
great.
I Yeah, and I just enjoy art in general. I don't know if there's no way that you've been in the psychedelic research and not encountered any of the Alex Gray art.
Absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah,
dude.
I love that, and I would, I love just visual art stuff like that. But definitely, I would say marijuana can contribute to
Couple
some
of
of that.
tokes, you know.
Yeah,
I it must be so satisfying, you know, for the artists that are really talented and they can reproduce their DMT experiences or their psychedelic experiences
right.
to like in detail. Can you imagine being able to do?
We didn't really touch much on that. TMT, like, is that how much experience do you have with that?
Yeah, so really interesting story. So once again, about a year ago, I've only been in this psychedelic world for the last year, and it's all just happened. Like I started doing mushrooms
Oh, it does.
therapeutically. It just
It
happened.
opens up so many doorways. Like, yeah.
I had a friend turn up to my house one day, and he brought two other lads that I'd never met. He was my best friend, and they all came in, and very nice guys. And he just pulled out this pipe, and he was like, "Have you ever tried DMT?" And I was like, "No, but I've always wanted to." But I was just in the middle of watching some random thing on the telly. I was gonna have a quiet Friday night in, and all of a sudden, I'm about to go off to a different dimension. It's quite and ah,
Or
I
all of
felt
them.
quite, yeah, I felt quite intimidated. But I mean, they turned up and they had one of those, the bowls, the singing
Yeah,
bowls.
of
They
course.
had one of those, and I'm not gonna lie, dude. I'd been thinking about doing DMT for a long time before, and I was picturing what it might be like. And I had a few drags, and I actually was quite intimidated, and I actually was quite scared when I first did it, and I didn't
Oh,
like it.
that I feel like that comes with the territory. I've done it several times now, and every time I even think seriously about going back, I get that feeling of like, oh, and I think it's so familiar. The DMT state is so familiar that yeah, it scares you a little bit when you think about it, even like to go back and do it again, because I think it stirs something in you that's like that's so alien, that's so familiar. Why? You know,
And it's so real. Do you know what I mean? That's the
right. More
problem.
more
Well,
real
not a
than
problem,
maybe
but
this. Yeah.
yeah. Um, and I had quite an interesting journey because I went through. So I had that evening. I didn't really enjoy it very much, and I didn't really get a proper experience because I was kind of freaking out, trying to open my eyes and whatever. And I went through a process of maybe 5 or 6 times over the next couple of months of trying it again when the opportunity arose. And same was going on. I was too scared, basically. And I was really annoyed with myself because I was like, dude, like I know where this could take me. I'm hearing these stories of what people are experiencing, and I was getting really wound up. And one day I can't actually recall, but I just let it take me, you know?
Okay.
And I had the most beautiful experience. And ever since
Now,
that
isn't it
day,
wild that you could be that hesitant, but you would never be as willing to do it again as right after you come back? You're like, I could probably do that again.
yeah,
There's
yeah, it's
people that'll
like
do it back to back. Yeah, it's very, very wild that way. Once you
well,
dip your toe, it's the curiosity can pull you in.
I went from being way too scared to do it with people around me to just about being willing to do it with people around me to doing it on my own with my bed covers over my head with a
And
um
see, I don't think that I would even partake with people around me. I really
no.
Terence McKenna has this quote where he talks about go it alone, and I think that that's the 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 heroic dose for him is 5 grams in silent darkness. That's by yourself, and I think that we live in a society now that is very afraid of being alone and being with those inner thoughts. And I think if we were forced to face those, I think that we all would be maybe more humble and
Mm.
more apathetic, or not apathetic, empathetic towards the way we treat each other and the way we act. Because I think in general we are so consumed by chaos and with social media and the world's going. We don't really stop to be alone with our thoughts or ourselves in general. And I try to encourage that with people. And I know it's not for everybody. A lot of people don't like to just be alone with their thoughts, but I think that
Mm.
and I don't think that psychedelics are for everybody as well. But I think that there are a lot of people that could open up a lot of possibilities for themselves and maybe heal a lot of things for themselves.
I totally agree. I think if everybody had tried psychedelics at some point, the world would be a very different place, you know? Like,
Right. I also think that there are just people who are prepositioned to have like somewhat mental breakdowns with schizophrenia and stuff like
oh,
that. And
totally.
and so I worry about being like all 100% like, yeah, everybody try this, and acid's great. Everybody has to try this. It feels like light coming out of your forehead. That's great for some people, but for some people, I think it would literally be like once they're alone with those thoughts, then it all comes crumbling.
Some people that see demons anyway without taking any psychedelic
Right.
substances, you know? Like, yeah, totally, totally. Um,
Have you had any LSD experiences?
yes, it's been no, it hasn't been a while. I did some over Christmas
Okay,
with my friend, and my friend, he's very much like us. He takes it seriously, and this is the same friend that introduced me to the DMT, and we booked. You guys have Airbnb, right? In the US, you call
yes,
it Air. Yeah, of course. Like we booked an Airbnb, and we did like a little ceremony, and
cool.
it's been a while. It's been a while since I did that at Christmas, and then before that, it'd been years, and it was quite eye-opening actually because we had a really good time, but I didn't connect with the LSD like I do personally with the mushrooms or the DMT. It was quite a more, I was saying this to Rory, a more artificial experience. I mean, what
Okay.
about you? How do you, what do you
If
think
I'm
about it?
being completely honest, what I LSD by itself is okay. I like what they call soul bombing, and I like to take about 1 or 2 grams of mushrooms and a small amount of LSD, like a half tab or a tab.
Wow.
I like it together, and I feel like, yeah. The thing about LSD is that, do you have 12 hours? You know,
Mm.
whereas mushrooms can be, I can be normal and then, cry my eyes out in 3 hours and working through some things, and then okay in a few. It's not 12 to 14 hours of,
I'd say it'd be quite intense, wouldn't it, if the mushrooms remained for 12 hours? Jesus.
right. Yeah,
Dude, we'll have to hang out sometime. You sound like a fun guy to go to a party with or something, like
yeah.
honestly, doing mushrooms and LSD at the same time. Um,
Well, you say that, how do you feel about like the way that, like it's very much associated with the rave culture and stuff like that? How do you feel about psychedelics? And for me, sometimes it stirs a little bit of like, I want people to be discovering this, but I also want them to maybe have more reverence for it.
Yeah, I feel like when I first started, I've done quite a lot of LSD over the years, and when I first started taking it, it was in the rave scene, and that's kind of what I associated it with. But in this last year, when I've been taking it therapeutically and seeing this side of it, I would never take LSD in a rave scene now for that reason, because I have
And see,
respect
my
for
it,
it,
my 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 perspective has changed a little bit on that here. Just, even more lately, is that like, I can somewhat appreciate the full spectrum of what it offers and what it can do for people. And I know that some people may be having like these really interpersonal experiences, starting out like, oh, I'm just trying to party. And then, I do wish people would take it seriously and have reverence for it. But also, I don't think that it's not a spiritual experience to connect and have fun with friends. And,
I hear
I
you.
think it's,
I
I
hear
think it's
you.
a, I think it's a spectrum.
It's a difficult one because, like, I guess it for me, it depends on your intentions. So I must
Right.
admit, like, we have a festival called WOMAD. It's a brilliant festival. It's very kind of hippie, kind of live music everywhere, and cider
Sounds
bars
awesome.
and beautiful. It's a beautiful festival. And I actually did take. This was only last year. I took about 4 grams of mushrooms, but like I was saying earlier on about the whole that kind of dose of the Makilla Gorilla doesn't, I'm not off my head. I'm functioning, but I am experiencing life with all of my personality, and that was actually like the reason I took it at the festival because I want and. I just had such a great time and I met some great people and had some great conversations. And that was actually
There,
my,
there are some lower doses that just like, you're hinting at it, and great, like you feel like you can be authentic.
mm,
And, I think that there's definitely a threshold of, and I think that maybe is why some people use it so much for party drugs too, is it's like you can be very present and very authentic and very comfortable in your skin.
and it's so uncomfortable when you can't be yourself, right? I mean, I struggle with
Right.
social anxiety. I mean, not to a high degree, but a certain amount where I won't always be myself, And as you just said, you hit the nail on the head. The mushrooms allow you to be you, and I think there's a really rewarding, satisfying experience that comes along with that.
Right.
And I'm actually kind of I've never really thought about it like that, dude. This is what I mean. It's like an unconscious. I didn't really think about it in that way. That it kind of helps you to be your authentic self. But as we're talking, I'm like, wow, yeah, that is what it's doing. And
And what is more foreign now than to just feel comfortable and be authentic and just be you. You know what I mean? There's so many, with social media and things like that, there's so many outside influences telling you what you should think and what you should do, and I think, and I wouldn't call it social anxiety. I've just always been very much an introvert, and I do these psychedelics, alone and stuff like that. But I think that part of like being social and not having social anxiety was being comfortable by myself first, and then, you know what I mean. And
I
I think
do.
that that's definitely something that mushrooms do is that they rip away all the layers, and it will, it's a hell on wheels. You're in it, and once you sign up, you're there.
Mm. I think it's a very powerful thing to be able to consciously choose solitude and be comfortable with it. I'm that guy as well. Like I had a girlfriend about 5 years ago. It was a really toxic relationship. We broke up and I've been single ever since. And dude, I wouldn't have it any other way. Like people are seeing me from the outside and they're like, "Oh, I feel really sorry for you. Like I worry about you." And I'm like, "Dude, like,
This is
I'm
amazing.
having
I have my space, and I can,
I'm
nerd
happy,
out on the
man."
things I nerd
Like,
out on, and yeah, yeah.
yeah. And
And
I
that's
don't have
that's another thing with the like, aside from my work and stuff like that, is like my cultivation hobbies are just, that's part of that is just that it's just me and my my projects and my grow stuff. And I'm one of those people that needs that solitude to reset and recenter, or otherwise I start feeling that inauthenticity of like, I don't feel like I can be myself if I don't get that time to recenter. And then, for me, with just as a big picture with the PTSD and all of that, like I felt like I was losing myself. So when I feel like I'm getting in a rut and losing some of that, like the psychedelics help me center and figure out what that is. When I say myself, like what is that to me? How do I recenter, and how do I be me? And I think that's where the psychedelics are, like I said, the most personal medicine that you'll ever encounter. Is it's tailor made for you each time.
it really is a tool. I like that description of it. It's a tool that can be used for um, personal growth. It's
And
brilliant.
and and I try to emphasize that with people, because I don't want people to get the misconception of like, man, like I've had people that I work with and other vets that are like, man, you seem like you're doing so well, and and I try to just be authentic and say, I have my ups and downs, stuff like that too. And I try not to tell people they're like, oh, well, this medicine, this mushrooms, or this is going to change you, or it is a tool, and it's going to assign some homework, and it's not always going to be the best work. But if you truly care about authentically being better and being the best version of yourself, then you'll dig in.
Mm. I look forward to the day when they're more commonly known and widespread, and it's not like an
Right.
underground thing.
Right.
And I think that'll be coming. I do think that's going to be coming. The final thing I wanted to talk to you about, dude, was the importance of a work-life balance. And I think you were saying that you work really hard. I mean, would you say you have a good work-life balance? Is that something that you prioritize?
um I try really hard right now. Like I said, this was just like a more of a startup grow and stuff like that, an established company but a startup grow. And as things are leveling out now, I definitely have a better work and life balance. This last year maybe I didn't as much as I should. But yeah, I'm realizing, the older I get, and the more, this is the first job that I've brought real passion to. It's something I care about and I want to do, and I don't dread going to work every day, and stuff like that. And I that makes it very personal for me. So I start to see the ruts and some of that. And again, psychedelics has been a tool for me for that. I get burnt out, and
Mm,
that's a slippery slope with something you're passionate about. You don't want to sour the milk, um,
mm.
per se.
I mean, you have a very interesting situation because your job, by the sounds of it, is your kind of life in terms of, that's what you enjoy doing. So
Right. And
maybe,
that's what made me chase that job, was that, I could turn something that I'm, already somewhat passionate about, and it just seemed like one of those life moments of like, of alchemy, man.
mm,
You take that energy and you swing it in the direction you need to. And that's where that job coming up for me was. I was, right after my divorce and trying to move from here, and the only thing I had grounding me was, that small cultivation of mushrooms, and and my psychedelic, work and just inner work. And when that came up, it just seemed like, you know, like tiles being laid in front of me.
Mm. Since I've been using the mushrooms, I've been going through this what I would call a transition period of like spiritual realization. I mean, I woke up one morning a couple of months ago now and just decided that I wanted to spend more time investing in my own personal interests outside of work. And I work as an electrician. I enjoy it. I install solar panels. I do that kind of thing. And um, but I just went into work and I cut my hours down and started investing more in my degree and my YouTube and all of that. And I've never been happier. And my question to you was, have you ever considered doing something like that yourself? But I guess the answer would be no, right? Because you're enjoying what you do for a living. Like,
No and yes, man. Like I really enjoy what I'm doing, but at a certain point, I would like to reach a level or, a point with my company where maybe I don't have to work as many hours. And, you know, if you know me, my friends would probably joke that why so you can go home and work on your grow. And I'm like, maybe a little bit. Yeah, maybe a little bit, just focus on the things that I care about and stuff like that. But I think overall, work and life balance, like I find the most guilt comes from spending too much time at work and all those other things and not making time for family and loved ones and stuff like that. So it's always a juggling act, I think, for everybody.
mm,
And I think that, if I had to do anything differently right now, it would just be to spend more time with my family and stuff like that while I have when I have the chance.
I hear you. I think that we are a creative species, and exploring that aspect of our personality is so integral because, so important because it's an integral part of who we are. And I actually feel very sad for people who either don't realize that or don't have the opportunity to explore that part of themselves due to socioeconomic circumstances, Like some
Right.
people can't afford to be off work.
Right. And I think about that a lot sometimes too, is that, man, when it comes right down to it, if you're working a 40-hour work week, during that 5-hour work week or whatever you work, like that's it. You prep for the next day and that's it. And I often wonder, how much creativity and groundbreaking things do we stifle just by being, in that groove, in that grind? Do you feel that you've opened up more creativity or just more opportunity based on time?
Very good question. I don't feel that I've the second one. I don't feel that I've become more creative, but I've got more opportunity to be creative, which was always
Okay,
my
great,
intention.
great.
Um, yeah, man, it's just so easy to get caught up with earning money, paying bills, earning money, paying bills, and you forget, a lot of people forget
And,
to live, you
and
know?
see, that's something that for sure that comes from like you said from psychedelics and that you start to wonder, like means to an end, for what? Where am I going with this? What now what? And yeah, I can see that. Especially, for me, I feel very just blessed and opportunistic to work in the industry I work in because it's something that I had obsessed with, on my free time before. So it
Mm,
kind of seems like I beat the system, some days I'm like, man,
mm.
I can't believe, but I don't think that everybody has that. And I think that uh, a lot of times that there is no room for creativity.
How did you actually, I don't know if you mentioned it already, find your job? Did you just know somebody who knew somebody? I mean, how did that come around?
Um, so I had heard just this is kind of a small town that there's this new grow coming in, blah blah blah, and I actually just found it online and applied. And I
Mm,
had applied originally to do maintenance because I used to weld and I have construction you know experience stuff like that. And then when I went in for the interview, the cultivation supervisor at the time, we kind of started kicking the ball around a little bit and talking about cultivation, if I had grown a little bit of anything in the past. So then I had kind of decided, like, I'll start entry level, I'll stick it out for a little while and just see, what it's like. Just I had never worked in the industry, and I had grown just what I had grown at home as far as, weed.
Mm. I'm glad you found your thing, man. It's important. Many
Yeah,
people don't. Many people don't,
yeah,
you know.
I agree.
I found an interesting study that I just wanted to mention. The American Psychological Association found a positive correlation between employees feeling valued with a good work-life balance and higher engagement levels at work. And they also found that employees who engage in creative activities at home demonstrate improved problem-solving skills at work. So this isn't just beneficiary for employees. Employers are getting a workforce who are more inclined to graft, and they want to be
Right.
there
I
because
mean,
they feel like they're being looked
if you're
after.
if you're mentally in a rut, man, like you're gonna stay there. And if you can't find some way to disconnect or reconnect or reset somehow, whether that be through your art or whatever you do, I think that you're just going to remain in that small mindset. And that's the magic with psychedelics, is that it opens up your perception of possibility to
Mm,
whereas, maybe in the past you would be like, well, that's it. I've tried everything. I can't solve this problem. Just on the micro scale, you might, be more willing to think outside the box.
mm. At the end of the day, we're on shared time, and it's important to be meticulous with it. So I guess that's the message I'm trying to convey
Right.
here. And I'm realizing that more than ever getting into my late 20s,
And
it's the first
I,
time, yeah.
I feel that now, but I definitely started feeling it as I turned 30 and stuff is kind of like the clock's ticking and where am I going and what am I accomplishing and stuff like that. But I think yeah, I think that that can be broken into to day by day type things. And I think that's, when I hear of somebody like taking less time at work to do it, it makes perfect sense to me.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? And if anything, I think some people might be more productive with like 5 less hours a week. They really would be. Just the burnout can be real when you're doing the same things over and over.
Hmm. Look, dude, I've really enjoyed talking to you.
Yeah, it's been
It's
great, man.
it's been so impactful to speak to a veteran who's also an advocate for psychedelics, and to
Yeah.
hear the struggle that you've been through with your PTSD and your emotional disconnection and your subsequent emotional freedom through your psychedelic use. Well, it's very warming and uplifting and reassuring, and thank you for sharing it, man.
Yeah, man, thank you for having me. And I appreciate people just doing the work, man. I have always thought that maybe I could contribute or help somehow with psychedelics and veterans or something. And I think you're on a good track, man. Like you're just getting information out is going to help a lot of people.
Mm. What would you say is like a final message to anybody out there who's listening, who might be
Um,
dealing with
so I have
emotional?
maybe just a short message. I remember you having that question for me, but I have a Terence McKenna quote that I want to kind of like maybe end with. Um,
Sure.
I just think that my advice would be your emotional and inner self is important. And I think that if you're like a vet or not even a vet, just anybody struggling with trauma or not struggling with trauma, just your emotion and inner self is very important and you should tend to it and you should listen to it. And I don't know, maybe if someone's never considered psychedelics, maybe don't say yes or no, just read it, do a little bit of reading and maybe just think outside the box just a little bit and see if there's different avenues that can help you. The quote I'd like to read is from Terence McKenna. Nature loves courage. You make the commitment, and nature will respond to that commitment by removing impossible obstacles. Dream the impossible dream, and the world will not grind you under. It will lift you up. This is a trick. This is what all these teachers and philosophers who really touched the alchemical gold. This is what they understood. This is the shamanic dance in the waterfall. This is how is done by hurling yourself into the abyss and discovering that it's a featherbed.
Wow. Amen to that.
Take a chance, guys.
Thanks, Tanner.
Later, man.
What an interesting guy. I think Tanner made some really interesting points regarding SSRIs and self-identification. It's really important to highlight how crucial it is to be in touch with our emotions. And I'm not against SSRIs by any means. As I said to Tanner, for people out there who are suffering the extremities of excessive, irregular, disproportionate emotion, SSRIs are necessary. My worry is that we live in a world where we're taught that if you feel a little bit anxious or you feel a little bit depressed, you should start medicating. Life is full of depressing, worrying, anxiety-provoking situations. It's just the world that we live in. Emotions exist for a reason, and we're supposed to experience them in those circumstances. The reason I'm an advocate for psychedelics is that in the correct supported setting, they can not only help you experience your emotions, but they can aid you in your mental recovery. Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed the video, and we'll see you next time.